Okay, so today is Sunday. The rough drafts for paper 4 are due, and the rough draft for this assignment is mandatory. So the paper 4 final draft guidelines are here on the screen. For the rough draft, there are different guidelines, like the length. You will only have to write 2.5 pages. Those guidelines are posted in the paper 4 rough draft Dropbox, so be sure to look at that. That's how you're going to be assessed and given a grade for the rough draft. Obviously it's a draft, so I do take that into consideration, the grammar and the mechanics, the organization. It may only be 2.5 pages, so that means it's only halfway done. Just pay attention to those grading guidelines so that way you know what you need to do to get an A for the rough draft. The final draft guidelines, the length and the format, and then the sources. There should be 3 to 6 reliable sources. And if you do use more than 6, that may be okay. I really just put a limit on that just so that students don't run into the issues of having too many sources or source text in their essay, and that would relate to that originality or similarity percentage. So if you're using a lot of different sources, then you may be using a lot of textual evidence, and your paper may start to end up being just the textual evidence instead of your own original ideas. So that's really why I put the limit on there. So if you do need to go over that, then that's fine. I do require, though, a minimum of 3 sources. So the story should be used in the paper, the story from the textbook, and then 2 reliable sources, preferably that you find on the Eastern Florida databases. If you find an academic journal or a reliable source not using the databases, then that could be okay. I'm not going to say that is absolutely all right, because I do have to evaluate the sources that you're using. If it's from the database, then the sources are considered reliable and you'll be fine. We won't have a problem with the source not being reliable enough to use. Versus if you're finding a website and then you go and you turn in a rough draft and I evaluate it and the website is not reliable, then that means you have to then go out and seek sources again. So that's why I really just suggest that the database is the method that is used. So the discussion 9, you were able to post what your research topic or question is, and then also from that answering your research question, and that will be your thesis. So I tried to put some comments on there for people, and even if I didn't comment on your paper, I would still suggest that you read my comments that I gave to other students, because it may be helpful to you. I know thesis development can be tough, so I put on a comment to one of your classmates about a thesis generator that it may be helpful in figuring out how to form your thesis. It's a website provided by one of the universities. So go ahead and read those comments. Definitely, if your peers gave you feedback, read that over. That may be helpful. Like I said, the thesis statement was part of that discussion, and obviously a large focus of how you're getting started with this paper. You need to think about what your main idea in writing is. So that's your thesis statement. So the thesis is not a question. It's the answer to your question. So if you have a question as your thesis statement, go ahead and revise that to be the answer to that question. It's not really necessary to have the question in the introduction and then answer it with the thesis. It can be done, but it's not mandatory that you include both the research question and the thesis. And for this assignment, the thesis is not going to take a stance. It's going to explore the topic. And this is just an infographic about sources and the differences between the sources that anyone can find on search engines like Google and Yahoo, and then the reliable scholarly evidence, which is in this category called the deep invisible web. And these are the articles that have restricted access. Usually the information would require a paid subscription. They are not trying to sell the consumer anything. So if you're going on a database, you don't see ads for the latest fashion items, or it's kind of funny now. I see when I'm on Google looking for an article and then click on a website, that website may have an ad on the side for like Chewy. It's a dog food company. I may have been looking on Google an hour before on getting my dog some food, and it's funny how then those ads are pulled in. So if you're on a website and you see ads, and that's a red flag that is not considered a reliable website that you should use for academic papers. So just a little visual here to further explain why it's really important to evaluate these sources and make sure you're using reliable sources, and then really another push for why the databases are just superior over other types of search engines. Here is a video by the USF Writing Commons about why academic writers use evidence. So this was also in your MLA quiz. One of the questions was, why do we cite information? But citing information is also, why are we using information? So, we want to use information from experts. Having an author with a source is much more preferable over having an unknown, anonymous author. So when you use sources, it doesn't have to be full paragraphs of, long quotations. It can be short information like statistical evidence, an expert opinion on something, vivid language, and anecdotes. You could get an anecdote from research as well, kind of like illustrating a point. And then you want to use a variety of evidence in your paper, so you don't want to always just directly quote. You can summarize, paraphrase, and use direct quotations. So I would suggest you looking over this YouTube video, integrating evidence. So here's that.
Hello,
so
nice to see you.
I'm not going to go through that, but integrating evidence gives a little bit more information on how to do so and why we do that, to make our arguments even more factual and reliable, and really have people listen to what we say. So another visual here is about plagiarism, and I've taught English courses for over 6 years. I was a graduate assistant at USF when I was in graduate school at the St. Pete campus, and so I've worked with a lot of freshman composition students, and most of the cases I've ran across where students plagiarize, it really wasn't because of purposely like buying a paper online and submitting it. Although there have been students who have used another student's paper, seen that, but a lot of times it's this lack of research skills, lack of time, really not understanding how to cite sources. So even though those are the case, plagiarism is still a serious offense. If you accidentally plagiarize, it's different than buying a paper online and submitting it. That would result in an immediate 0, and something like that would be reported to the college. But an accidental plagiarism is maybe not knowing how to cite the sources appropriately, or leaving out in-text citations all completely from the essay, but having sources on our work cited. So obviously there were sources read and used, but nothing was cited in the text. That is a type of plagiarism. Now, when I see something like that, that is grounds for me giving tips and giving the student a chance to revise, versus if a student purchases a paper online and submits it, that does not get a revision opportunity. So even with that said, I'd still want everyone to really work hard on citing the sources and using these documents that I've posted, like the MLA documents in week 1 and week 10. I have sample papers in there, so really there's no excuse to not have these basic formatting correct, like the spacing and what should be capitalized and if something should be centered or if something should be left aligned. All of that should be quite simple to follow because I have sample papers. Also, I've posted some different MLA videos in the announcements, and then there is the MLA handbook that was one of the textbooks. If by chance you did not get that, or if you're somewhere writing your paper and you don't have the text with you, you could use the Purdue OWL. That is a reliable website to use. There are a few other universities that have online writing labs that are also good, but really I'm going to say the Purdue OWL is the one that I would recommend using. And avoid any kind of citation builders like EasyBib. They just don't work, and it's kind of funny how they are, I mean, a lot of people use them, but the citations rarely come out correct. There's always some errors, so you know, you kind of run the risk of that. So here are some common formatting issues I've seen in just briefly looking over some of the rough drafts that have been turned in already. So it's Sunday afternoon, so you still have until this evening to turn in your rough drafts. But these are just some formatting issues that I've seen. So basic formatting, like I said, I've seen some of those errors. So what I want you to do is go to our course module. Week 1, I've got sample papers here. So the sample MLA paper right here, it's showing you exactly what you need. It even says creative title, right? So this is the first thing your reader sees is your title. So really try to spice that up. A lot of times I see titles that are kind of flat, like just more of like, oh, a comparison, or you know, more of explaining what the assignment was, versus the title should be unique to your paper. So here are the paragraphs, how it even says in the paragraph here what you need, the double spacing, the 12-point font, Times New Roman, all of that is listed, and then the works cited. Now for a hanging indent, the hanging indent, I've seen some students have it reversed. So the hanging indent is actually the first line is left aligned, and then the second line would have the indentation. So I have seen some students have the first line indented and the second line all the way to the left. So just look that over. You know, that's another one, that hanging indent in Google Docs or in Word, and there's tons of instructions and videos, and Office support has information there, so it's really easy now with the internet at our fingertips to find everything we need with that. So the sample MLA paper is one. I have the sample works cited, the sample first page. Here's a PowerPoint on how to avoid that plagiarism as well. So the other couple or a few in-text citation common errors that I see so far is if there is no author, then it should be the title abbreviated, and just make sure to include those quotation marks to indicate that it is the title abbreviated and not an author's last name, and then you would still include the page number if there is one. Punctuation, the punctuation, instead of going at the end of the quotation, so normally it would be there at the end of the word quote. We would now move that punctuation to be after the in-text citation. So it's no longer punctuation here unless it's a question mark or some, you know, a question mark obviously needs to be there to indicate it's asking a question, but if it's just a period or if it's comma, take out the comma, take out the period, and then just add your period here after the citation. All summaries, paraphrases, and citations must be cited to avoid plagiarism. So please remember that. I will help you all on your rough drafts with that, adding comments. But anything that you're getting from a source needs to be credited in the paper. It's much better to do that because it looks better to have source citations in your paper than not. So it's actually twofold on why it's necessary to do. And then the floating quotations is a comment that I put, you may have seen me put this on your paper 2 or 3, and just really to emphasize a floating quotation is a quotation that's just kind of stuck in there. It's not introduced in your own words. So here's a link to that explains a little bit more. For the works cited, the sources need to be in alphabetical order. They need to be double spaced with a hanging indent, and then also the source citations. I will help you all as needed with specific citations. but really the handbook lists how to cite a article from a journal or cite an article from a newspaper, or it has each kind of specific medium that you may be getting your source from, or the Purdue OWL is another great resource. All right, so that is it. Tonight the papers are due, so starting tomorrow is when the peer reviews will be available. So peer reviews are not available until after the rough draft due date. So I guess starting at 12:01 or midnight, the peer reviews will technically be open, and you will be able to start doing those. I will be giving feedback throughout the week. There's a lot of students that I have here to comment on. I want to give everyone's paper a fair read and enough time, and answer any questions that you may have. This paper is worth a total of 30% of your grade, so this is huge. We've got 5% toward the rough draft and peer reviews, and then the other 25% is the final draft. So, so take this seriously. When you're reviewing each other's papers, please take that seriously. Give constructive feedback. Saying you did great is nice, but pointing out something that they could do better is much better peer review than just telling them they did a great job, because that's not really helping them revise. And there's always room for revision. Even professional writers, they spend a lot of time revising. So give your classmates some good feedback, and if you have questions while peer reviewing, you can always email me as well if you have a question about something that you're reading on your peer's paper. I hope that you all have a great week. We're coming up on Thanksgiving, so just work hard this week on reviewing each other's papers and continuing to write your final paper for this course. All right, thank you so much. Bye.